Paul Dano in There Will Be Blood. He's everyone's favorite little Christian goober, except Quentin Tarantino. He starts the film asking Daniel Day-Lewis for money. He ends the film asking Daniel Day-Lewis for money. So what changes? Well, first off, the character he's playing. These are two different people. P.T. Anderson originally had someone else to play Eli, but they dropped out because he found Daniel's method acting too intense. I wonder why. Surprisingly though, Eli's character actually manages to pretty consistently grow his church throughout the whole movie, even expanding to radio by the 1927 time skip, no doubt soullessly copied by future famed radio show host Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But of course, both great orators share the same ultimate fate of dropping dead when they least expected it, which leaves the ultimate question of why. Why did Eli Sunday have to die, and what mental cognition could have possibly led him back to Daniel?
Now, while it could be argued that Eli Sunday's greatest psychological roadblock in this film is blunt force trauma to the head, it's worth taking a step back to consider what got him in this situation. Eli's financial concerns are actually what cause a large portion of his conflicts with Daniel, starting from the very beginning. In their first little spat, Eli drives up the bargaining price of the Sunday ranch, including a $5,000 signing bonus to the Church of the Third Revelation, which clearly annoys Daniel.
That's good.
He puts up with it in the moment, but already halfway through, Eli asking for his money leads to what can only be described as the greatest piece of cinema ever put to film. Eli's cupidity in this situation is somewhat understandable, since Daniel did actually promise him the money, but it's his business proposition at the end that gets him Mortal Kombat finishered by his own church.
I am the Third Revelation!
This brings us back to the question, why on earth do this? He refers to the recent panic in the economy, but keep in mind this is 1927, not 1929, so he should be referring to the mild recession and oil price shocks at the time and not, it. And he briefly mentions his investments in an aggravatingly truncated line in both the film and script, but other than that, his main concerns are moral. I'm a sinner. So why does a preacher need more money when he looks decently well off? Why does he need to drill for oil so bad when, after all, isn't a love of money a root of all kinds of evils? Isn't the Christian church meant to be pure from concern of material possession? Oh.
Consider the act of sublimation, a defense mechanism proposed by renowned psychoanalyst and cocaine addict Freud, Sigmund, or as I like to call him, the man so progressive he discovered the existence of trans men in 1908. Sublimation refers to the diversion of socially unacceptable desires
I want.
into a socially acceptable outlet, like a necrophiliac becoming a mortician, or a racist running for office on a Republican ballot. Eli in this movie is no less greedy than Daniel. He just channels it through God. I want the money for the church, Daniel. Give me the money for the church, Daniel. A greedy man stirs up strife, but one who trusts in the Lord will be enriched, Daniel. So, when Daniel forces him to claim,
I am a false prophet, God is a superstition,
he's tearing apart Eli's almost institutionalized method of sublimation, which is naturally followed by Eli's subsequent breakdown as he confronts his inner materialism and admits to being Michael B. Jordan. Consider, but false prophets also arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who brought them, bringing upon themselves swift destruction. And in their greed, they will exploit you with false words. And for the wicked boasts of the desires of his soul, and the one greedy for gain curses and renounces the Lord. You actually can't make this up. The Bible quite literally equates false prophets plus renunciation of God with greed. Eli's behavior highlights how religion can often be used to cover up / justify morally dubious behavior under the guise of the high road, but also how quickly Christianity can seemingly forsake you. The time between Eli's atheist conversion therapy, along with an actual brief crisis of faith, and what can only be interpreted as God's commercial wrath, is like 10 minutes with no chance of parole. Eli was always a pretty terrible person, but if you're looking at this film from a strictly religious perspective, this moment is him receiving his concentrated dose of divine justice for straying from God. Because after all, what is Christianity if not the most popular form of sadomasochism? I'm like 95% sure I accidentally quoted a ContraPoints line there. I can't. Greed, admittedly, isn't the only sin he sublimates. It's just the most thematically relevant to Karl Marx. For example, he clearly possesses some kind of wrath, which he saves for the most appropriate situations. Early 20th evangelical sermons. The one exception is, well, But that admittedly still happens behind closed doors, and also just shows the cracks in Eli's ego. There's also something to be said here about projection, specifically in regards to his brother and father.
You're lazy and you're stupid.
You're just F. afterbirth, Eli.
Despite portraying a clear understanding of religion, There Will Be Blood is still an ideologically atheist film. There's a guilty pleasure in Daniel's destruction of Eli's religious beliefs, alongside his head, that can only be described as an intended consequence of making him the most irritating goober in the film. Still, consider the film's overarching and not at all socialist portrayal of religion, specifically Christianity, as a capitalist superstructure designed to control the proletariat by equating virtue with being poor and sin with being rich. The reason Eli defense mechanisms his greed into the recesses of that one river in Egypt is because it conflicts with the value built into his superego, that being greedy is morally wrong.
I won.
A sin. Yeah, you get it already. This belief comes at least in part from his religion, whereas Daniel, on the other hand, has no such qualms with his own lust and greed. It is perhaps this difference that allows Daniel to become so successful in a capitalist society, while Eli ends up on the floor of a bowling alley owned by his archenemies with his head milkshakeified. If you look at this film through the eyes of an average Karl Marx stan, or just Bernie Sanders, you could even argue religion serves as a method to limit Eli, in this situation of the proletariat, from becoming as successful as Daniel, the bourgeoisie, by labeling the pursuit of monetary success as a sin, thus causing an inner conflict that a godless oil man just doesn't have. Daniel and Eli are two sides of the same coin, and that coin is a really big $5,000 church signing bonus. It's just one is explicit and the other implicit. We get to see how the banknote corrupts and perverts not just themselves, but their lives and the people around them, like this poor woman with arthritis. Along with front row seats to a uniquely human, American, and Christian sense of cognitive dissonance that surely couldn't have had anything to do with current events in 2007. Anything at all. Anderson, along with Paul Dano himself, does a great job of blending together Eli's psyche, religion, and Marxism, like milk, ice cream, and flavorings and/or sweeteners, for after all, in fact, though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's word all over again. You need milk, not solid food.
Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the